And that is another reason why the ring should be destroyed. As long as it in the world, it will be a danger even to the wise. For nothing is evil in the beginning. Falco reached the crest of the hill, and peering out over the opposite hillside of the valley, and lo and behold, the full breadth and width of a great host of armored orcs breaking through the dense fog rolling over the weather hills from the east, their methodical march and force of each heavy step shaking and echoing throughout the valley. Falco knew where they were heading, making their way southwest to the lands of the village of Bree. An overwhelming sense of dread waved over Falco's being, but he was not to be daunted. As he clenched his teeth, sharpened his gaze to see and remember all he could of the army of orcs, before sliding back down and away from sight. He mustered all his hope and courage and quickly ran the marathon back to Bree to muster a call to arms and a defense against the battle ahead. This is a narrative example of the player-hero experiencing the shadow, where they have faced either a moment of dread, greed, a decision to make a misdeed, or experiencing the effects of sorcery or a spell of the enemy. The shadow mechanic in the One Ring is a valuable and integral part of the game that brings out the theme threaded throughout the works of J.R.R. Tolkien, the constant struggle of the hero against the always corrupting and ever-growing presence of evil. Shadow points is the metric that represents the player-hero's constant struggle against the increasing power of the shadow and force of the enemy, growing at the twilight of the Third Age of Middle-earth.
Take some rest. These borders are well protected.
I will find no rest here. I heard her voice inside my head. She spoke of my father and the fall of Gondor. And she said to me, even now there is hope left. But I cannot see it. It is long since we had any hope.
Shadow points are the opposite of a player-hero's hope points and represent the personal burden that weighs on their minds as they adventure and face the forces of the enemy. As they venture out from the relatively safe of their homes, shadow points are gained through either actions committed by themselves or more commonly through the direct or indirect actions of agents of evil or witnessing such things. There are 4 sources of shadow: dread, greed, misdeeds, and sorcery. Dread is the most common source of shadow that a player-hero will generally face. A player-hero may witness the effects of some form of natural disaster, such as a fire raging and burning down a small village, seeing the direct work of orcs in tainting the lands, being followed and haunted by an unseen wight, or directly experiencing the power of the enemy through seeing the eye in a palantir. Think Pippin when he holds onto the palantir in The Return of the King.
What is it? What do you see?
I see shapes of men. And of horses.
Where?
Pale banners like shreds of cloud. Spears rising. Like winter thickets through a shroud of mist. The dead are following. They have been summoned.
The dead? Summoned? I knew that. Very good. Very good. Look at this!
Depending on the source of the dread, a player-hero may gain upwards to 4 shadow points, as represented on the table found on page 138 in the core rulebook. Greed is the next most common form of shadow that a player-hero may experience, where hordes of gold and great stores of enchanted arms and armor lay in forgotten caves. Heroes risk being corrupted by their own desire to carry and wield such treasures, as they lay hidden and in the darkness for a very long time. If the treasure was tainted, or worse, cursed, they may accumulate shadow points as deemed appropriate by the lore master, or as decided using the rules as outlined in the treasure section found on page 158 of the core rulebook. Misdeeds are direct actions, or even inactions, by player heroes that so heavily weigh on their souls that the shadow encroaches in their minds, and there is no fighting it. Misdeeds are so demanding on their spirit that they may be tempted to adopt extreme measures, especially to achieve even the noblest of goals. A shadow point from a misdeed are given when a player hero commits an act that is essentially wrong or even nefarious in nature, regardless of the objective they are trying to achieve. The table found on page 139, titled Misdeeds, outlines some actions that warrant shadow points, with the most extreme act giving high shadow plus a shadow scar. Sorcery is the last of the possible ways a player hero can gain shadow points. Those in the favor of the Dark Lord may have special powers or abilities, and when the player hero falls victim to these, shadow is gained. The number of points gained by a player hero is directly related to the type and power of the sorcery.
Go back to the abyss! Fall into the nothingness that awaits you and your master.
Do you not know death when you see it, old man? This is my power.
But not all hope is lost, however, as the player hero may make what's called a shadow test. For the sources of shadow, dread, and greed, one makes what's called a shadow test, valor. And for sorcery, the player hero makes a shadow test, wisdom. Depending on the rank that the player heroes have in valor or wisdom, corresponds to the number of success dice they can add to their feat die when making a shadow test. The target number is dependent on the type of test and corresponds to the heart or wits target number associated with that test. A player can spend a point of hope, if they have and can spend any, to further add another success dice. Some patron abilities, cultural blessings, and virtues may further aid in a player hero succeeding on a shadow test. If the player succeeds on their shadow tests, they reduce the number of shadow gained by 1 point, with an additional 1 point reduced for each success icon rolled on their success dice. Misdeeds are so overpowering that no player hero can make a test to reduce or negate the amount of points gained. Lore Masters should warn players when they are about to carry out a misdeed during an action or inaction.
I do not fear death.
Well, this is a thing unheard of. An elf will go underground when a dwarf dare not. Oh, I'd never hear the end of it.
Falco, in the example as narrated earlier, experienced a moment of great dread, seeing the assembly and marching of a great host of orcs marching on towards Bree, his home. The scale of the force, him being alone to view such a sight, and the threat to his home and all brought the shadow upon him. He did not let this daunt his heart, however, and dug deep within him to make the journey home and gather arms to defend against the threat. In game terms, he makes a shadow test dread. Valor is associated with dread, therefore, Falco's target number is 14. He has 2 ranks in Valor, and wishes to spend a point of hope to add another success dice to the roll. Therefore, Falco rolls 1 feat die and 3 success dice, 2 ranks for the Valor and 1 for the point of hope spent. But wait, his patron is none other than Gandalf the Grey himself, and as patron, he grants Falco with spending a fellowship point from the fellowship pool to make a shadow test favored, which he does. Falco rolls 2 feat die. For being favored, rolling a 7 and an Eye of Sauron. Good thing he was favored and selects the best result, being the 7. Next, he rolls 3 success dice, getting as a result a 3, a 4, and a 6, a success dice. Looking at his target number, under Heart, which Valor is associated with, we see it as being 14. Adding 7 plus 3 plus 4 plus 6 to get 20 on his roll, we see that he succeeds in passing the shadow test, decreasing shadow gain from 4 to 3. He also rolled a success icon, a 6, on his success dice, therefore dropping it further by another point from 3 to 2. Falco passes the test, but the shadow was still so overwhelming that it weighs heavy on his heart and effects still impact him. Falco marks the 2 remaining shadow points that he gained on the character sheet. Accumulating too much shadow will have negative effects on the player hero eventually. The amount of shadow will ebb and flow and is dependent on the number of factors either in control of the player hero or not. For instance, shadow can be reduced by successfully fighting the will of the enemy, and during the fellowship phase, the lore master decides how great a reduction that was and the amount of shadow to subtract from the player hero's total. Players struggling with the shadow may tap into their innermost reserves by hardening their will. In game terms, they convert all of their gained shadow and replace that number with 1 shadow scar. This can only happen if the total shadow before is less than their maximum hope score. On shadow scars, they can only be removed during the Yule of the fellowship phase by choosing the heal scars undertaking. Shadow scars are considered permanent and equal to a total of 1 shadow point when calculating the overall effects on your character. If a player's shadow is equal or more than their current hope score, they are considered miserable and see all their rolls hampered, meaning that every time they roll an Eye of Sauron on a feat die, the result is always a failure. If their total shadow matches their maximum hope score, player heroes are so overburdened by their fears that they become ill-favored on all rolls. There is but one way to recover from such depths of desperation. The player hero must experience a bout of madness. Madness is a violent outburst, a dangerous crisis that frees a player hero from the burden of the shadow. This may have serious and long-term consequences on the player hero, as outlined on page 139 of the core rulebook.
I know what you would say, and it would seem like wisdom, but for the warning in my heart.
Warning? Against what?
We're all afraid, Frodo. But to let that fear drive us to destroy what hope we have, don't you see that is madness?
There is no other way.
I ask only for the strength to defend my people. If you would but lend me the ring.
No.
Why do you recoil? I am no thief.
You are not yourself.
What chance do you think you have? They will find you. They will take the ring. And you will beg for death before the end. No! It is not yours, save by unhappy chance. It could have been mine. It should be mine. Give it to me! Give it to me! No! Give it to me! No! I see your mind. You will take the ring to Sauron! You will betray us! You go to your death, and the death of us all! Curse you! Curse you! And all the halflings! Frodo? Frodo? Please.
To play out a bout of madness, players must describe how their characters lose control for a short period of time, doing something they will later regret. This could be anything from a betrayal, where a player hero fails to live up to an assigned duty, or fear, where the player gives in to their fear and flees from any source of danger. A bout of madness could even be some verbal or even a physical form of aggression against a fellow company member, especially one targeting their fellowship focus. After the bout, the player hero who suffered the bout of madness is no longer ill-favored and removes all of their current shadow points, but they advance one step along their shadow path, as described here on page 140 of the core rulebook. Take careful note that the bout of madness as they occur during the current adventuring phase, as if the player hero enters into the fellowship phase with their shadow points equaling their maximum hope, they will have left the company and are retired from the game. Shadow paths, as mentioned with madness, is the path that a player hero unwillingly follows as they experience more and more the growing effects of the shadow and evil as they adventure. This shadow path is linked directly to their chosen calling. As player hero adventures and succumbs to more and more shadow and experiences more bouts of madness, they fall further and further into permanent madness. Or in the case of the elves, they leave the shores of Eriador and sail to the uttermost west and seek solace and healing from the darkness. With each bout of madness, the player hero develops a flaw, and each flaw is different depending on the calling that's chosen. These flaws have some real in-game effects, similar to distinctive features. Whenever a skill roll is made, the lore master determines if the player hero's flaw impacts their performance in a negative way. If the player hero is using a skill that can possibly be affected by a flaw, the rolls are made ill-favored.
Dragon sickness. I've seen it before. That look. The terrible need. It is a fierce and jealous love, Bilbo. It sent his grandfather mad.
Arlen, if Thorin had the Arkenstone, or if it was found, would it help?
That stone crowns all. It is the summit of this great wealth, bestowing power upon he who bears it. Would it stay his madness? No, lad. I fear it would make him worse. Perhaps it is best it remains lost.
The shadow and its effects on the player hero is an integral part of the One Ring and is one of the chief mechanics that separates this tabletop role-playing game from the others. Understanding the shadow and how it impacts the player hero's journey is vital for the lore master to know in order to fully bring out the look and feel of Middle-earth to their gaming table. I hope you found the video helpful. Please like, share, comment, and hit that subscribe button to help support the channel and make it grow. Thank you for the huge support so far received, and your feedback is very much appreciated. Check out my other videos such as my Strider mode, solo play, my choose your own adventure style adaptations of the starter set adventures, and if you're looking for some ready to go landmarks to add to your campaigns, check out the playlist here and download via the link in the video description. Again, thank you for watching and happy gaming.